being in water or doing that or that, whatever that does for me, I've realized is much more important and impactful than I think I realized. And it's part of my value system. And I wish I would have, thought about that more, because I think, our values potentially change throughout life, but there's a few core values that are probably going to stick around for most of it.
That's Noah Bernard, and this is the Powerful Ladies Podcast. Hey guys, I'm your host, Cara Duffy, and on this episode, our 100th episode of the Powerful Ladies Podcast. Can you believe it? I am so excited to introduce you to Noah Bernard. He's on my favorite humans list, and he's a great example of how to curate life based upon working hard, leaning in on your competitive spirit, and to always be following your own personal passions. I can't wait to hear what you get out of listening to his story. Before we jump into this episode, I want to remind you to come and join the Powerful Ladies Thrive membership. The best way to ensure you live your dream life is to have a community and a coach that will help you get there. And that's exactly what Thrive is for. Join me and fellow powerful ladies right now. Go to powerfulladies.mn.co. Jump into my twice weekly group coaching sessions to kickstart everything that matters to you. I can't wait for you to see what you can transform. Well, Noah, welcome to the Powerful Ladies Podcast.
Hi, Cara. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Well, I am really excited you're here. We haven't had a proper catch-up in about 100 years. And you're also one of the most interesting humans I know. So I got lots of things that I want to ask and talk about. But let's tell everybody who you are, where you're up to, and where you are in the world.
Well, that is a full-on setup. Now I've got to go through all the past history that we have, and now I've got to really step up, and I'm super interesting. So that's a little bit of pressure, but I think I'll try my hardest. Who am I? I am Noah Bernard. Where am I? I'm in London, England. I've been here. I'm American by trade, but I've been here in London for about 12 years now. Who am I? I'm originally from Texas, as I said, an American, former professional athlete that turned into somewhat of a marketer, that turned into somewhat of a little bit of an entrepreneur, that's turned into somebody who's trying to navigate my way through some crazy times and do my best at it as best I possibly can. Is who I am as a person, I would say. But yeah, that's a shortened, abridged version of who I am, but that's exactly who I am right now.
I figured we could start by talking about the first time I met you, which was the day that I went into the Puma Boston offices for an interview. And you were one of the people that interviewed me, one of the first three. And I'm waiting in this room and I'm nervous. I'm like, 25 or 26 at the time. And everyone had kind of gone through, being kind of routine. And then you come in with some crazy outfit on, like striped pants and this velour printed jacket and a cane and these crazy glasses and probably a hat. And you walk in, you lean back in the chair, you put your feet up on the desk, and your first question is, "Are you cool enough to work here?"
Oh, wow. That does sound like a very, very different version of me from many years ago. Yes. Let's see, the cane would have been because I had just broken my back, which has been something I've been dealing with for a long time and still dealing with to this day. I had just broken my back in a bicycle accident. The striped pants and the velour jacket would have definitely been my steez at that time. It probably hasn't changed too terribly much in the 15 years it's been since, probably more than 15 years that's happened. And the hat, to this day, I just did a thing a couple of weeks ago and everybody talked about different components and what you would associate or assimilate somebody with. And to a person, as soon as it came to me, everybody said hat.
Well, and there's like all these hats I can see in your background right now too.
Yeah, there's hats everywhere. But I was happy with that. But then I also thought, wow, the only thing you can associate me with is an accessory. I feel like I need to do a little bit more in my life to get more than just hats. But yeah, there's hats are still a part of it to this day. And if our friend Mark McGarry was listening to this, he would have a big chuckle about that, because at the same time I interviewed you, I interviewed Mark McGarry, and he wore a hat to the interview. And we walked out of the interview, and our good friend Louis Joseph said, "What do you think of the guy?" And I went, "Guy wore a hat to the interview. You can't wear a hat to the interview." And I gave him a proper run for wearing a hat. And now this guy's running an incredible business. He's an incredible guy, one of the coolest persons I ever got to work with. So, yeah, the hat theme continues on throughout our lives.
I love that. And to go back to your cycling, so you have a lot of athletic accolades. So tell me a little bit about your athletic history and some of your bigger achievements, which I'll remind you of if you don't remember.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, I started my career in sports is just really it's about my dad, essentially. My dad was a huge sportsman. He went to Texas A&M University. He in high school he tried out for the Dallas Cowboys and the St. Louis Cardinals. I think he got a shot at both of those guys, but decided to go in another direction in his life. And from a very young age, like, sport was the thing. I mean, it was the one thing that bonded my dad and I together. I said this to a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago. My parents or my mother used to joke, if they said flies fucking was a sport, my dad and I would watch it. We just any kind of sport. We consumed any and every type of sport. And so I grew up in that world. And, as a kid, I played soccer or football, and, I tried track and field, and I tried all these different things. But I landed on the sport of swimming quite early on. And part of it was because, if you haven't known, I've got a little bit of ADHD and a little bit of some other things going on. And I was a pretty hyper kid. And the only thing that could chill me out is if they threw me in the water for hours, and it just tired me out. So that was where my parents were like, okay, if we want this kid to be manageable at home, let's just put him in the pool for a while, let him swim for hours. And so that's kind of where it came from. But yeah, I started swimming competitively when I was 8 years old.
What stroke?
I was a backstroker my whole life, essentially. When I was super young, I was, nationally ranked, and, was on a couple of regional teams and a couple of national teams and stuff like that. Made it to the Junior Olympics and Senior Olympics and all that kind of stuff that you do. I went on a swimming scholarship to Ohio State, swam there for a year, and then transferred to the University of Arizona. And when I got to University of Arizona, one of the assistant swim coaches at University of Arizona was a triathlete. And I was a good swimmer, and I'd run a bunch at school as well, in high school and stuff like that. I ran a whole lot in high school and was a pretty good runner. And they used to do this kind of swim run in Tucson every year, and I always wound up doing pretty well, finishing in the higher rankings of it. And this assistant coach said to me, you're a pretty good swimmer and you're a pretty good runner. If you can just learn how to bike, we could turn you into a triathlete. And I was like, all right. And so, yeah, I met this guy who ran a bike shop, and he started training me for cycling. And then I started kind of doing a career in triathlon, and spent a few years trying my hardest to make it as a professional triathlete, which back then, this is the late 80s, early 90s. It was just a brand new sport. There wasn't a whole lot of, people doing it. But if you could make it as a professional triathlete, you could make a bit of bob doing it. And I tried and tried and tried and tried. And I got a couple of, deals. I got to deal with Power Bar and a few other kind of cool companies and things like that, but not enough to, to pay my rent, essentially. And I did that for a few years and, did an Ironman or did a couple Ironman,
hold on. Just did a couple Ironmans. It's like to skip over that, like to go from, I started doing a triathlete and then I did a couple of Ironmans. No big deal. How did you make that transition from triathlete to Ironman? And did you think you were insane when you were preparing for it? Or was it just like after you achieved it, you're like, oh, no big deal?
So my entry into the Ironman is very indicative of me as a person, I would say, in the sense that I was doing triathlons. I did my first triathlon with my friend Brian in Phoenix. We did a relay and I did the swim, he did the bike, and his brother did the run. And afterwards I was like, okay, this is cool. I want to do this. I'm really into it. So I did my first one. And I think in my first one, I finished either second or third overall. I finished quite high up in the rankings. And I thought, okay, this is it. Like, this is my new obsession. Because I'm that kind of person. I'm like, this is the thing I'm going to focus on. And I was trying to find races to go and do. And I found this race in Montreal. And it was called a long distance triathlon, which it wasn't an Ironman because it had to have the official moniker and the patent of Ironman, but it was a long distance one. And me being the person I am, I was like, long distance, I'm a good distance swimmer. I'm a good long distance runner. Pfft, easy peasy, mate. I'm signing up for that one. Like that was the one I'm going to sign up for. So I signed up for this and then realized that it was 2.4 miles of swimming, 118 miles of biking, and a marathon at the end. Yeah. I went to Montreal. The best part about this one is I went to Montreal, and the race was on. The swim was in a rowing venue, so it was just a concrete straight line venue that was a mile down, turn around, come back, and then half a mile. And then the bike ride was on a motorsport track that went in the circle.
Whoa.
And so it was 118 miles going around a circle on the racetrack.
Do you get dizzy? My goodness.
Yeah, exactly. And then the marathon run was on the inside of the racetrack, just going around in circles on that. And that was my first one I ever did. And I was like, I came back from it. I remember telling Brian, like, bro, I don't think this is for me. Like, this is just like,
that's the worst thing ever.
I was so bored. I did well. I think I finished in the top, 20%, 20 or something like that. But I remember I did well and I was like, yeah, but this isn't for me. And Brian was like, yeah, but that's not like a normal Ironman, mate. Like the real ones are, you go to Kona and you ride and you swim and it's in beautiful places and stuff like that. And that's where I was like, oh, really? I mean, that's not the format. I thought that was the format. And he was like, no. So yeah, so I did that one the first time. And then I just started doing shorter ones. And then I went to Canada a couple times, did a couple Ironman in Canada. I went to Kona once, did one in Kona. And it just kind of, I fell into it and just started doing that. That was my life for 6 or 7 years, just nonstop, just Ironmans, triathlons, running races, all that kind of stuff. It just, I kind of fell into it serendipitously and unintelligently as well. It's pretty much the way it works for me.
Is the community of the Ironman and the long distance triathlon world as cool as it sounds like? Like, I've never done either of those things, but the community seems rad.
Yeah, I mean, it's when I started off, it was really small. I mean, we were kind of the land of the misfit toys in sports. We weren't you weren't the fastest swimmer, you weren't the fastest biker, and you weren't the fastest runner, but you could put all three together and you could make it really. So the swimmers kind of looked at us with the weird eye, and the runners kind of looked at us with the weird eye, and the bicyclists kind of looked at us with a weird eye. But I think over time, because the sport's popularity has grown, and I think because of you've got just people that are, going from the couch to doing Ironman, and there's such a proliferation of books and, even races that have spun off, like Spartan races and Tough Mudders and all this other kind of thing. This kind of community of endurance people has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. It's become much more inclusive, I think. And it's also just become, I think it's a lot more, it's a lot more cooler, as you said, than it was back then. I mean, back then it was very much kind of an oddball group of people that did it. These were guys that I had a training partner who used to drain his cottage cheese, which I always thought was the weirdest thing ever. He would put it in a strainer and run water over it because he wanted to get the right amount of like nutrients or less fat or more fat. And it was that kind of world where it was just random dudes who had just, that went in like me, that just, really thought about it and really like were into it. Where now I feel like it's a little bit more fun. It's a little bit more joyous. It's a little bit more cool than it was back then. But, some of the coolest people and some of the biggest opportunities I have to this day are because of the people that I met back then. There's people that I still have in my life to this day that I met back doing those races, and I still rely on for mentorship or conversations or inspiration and stuff like that. So yeah, it was definitely a big part of my life, and still is to this day. Even though I'm not racing a lot anymore, it's still a big part of it.
Yeah, I've seen that you've been getting in the pool again, at least posting about it, and it looks like it's freezing.
Yeah, I've caught on to this this guy Wim Hof. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Oh, yeah. I do. Jesse's obsessed.
Is he? Yeah.
Yeah, Wim Hof, David Goggins. There's like this whole crew of like Troy Casey. He's been to one of Troy Casey's man camps.
Yeah, there's these guys. I mean, I found them through a friend of a friend of a friend. And it was, again, very much of my life serendipitous. I found him, and then about a kilometer from where we live, there's a pool here called the Tooting Beck Lido, which is over 100 years old. It's the only pool that's open year-round in south of London, but it's also the only pool that is, well, not the only pool, but it's one of the pools that's not heated. So in the summer, you get in, and the water temperature is, 23, which is, in the 70s back home. And then in the winter, it's like I went the day before we got locked down, it was 2 degrees, which is
Celsius?
38. Yeah. So yeah, I've been getting back into that. And I was ill for a couple of years recently with some different things. And one of the physicians and the therapist guy said, you got to get back into doing something. And swimming's always been there for me. It's always been, for whatever reason, it's always been my home. And he was like, dude, get back in the water and see if that'll work. And touch wood, it's been working so far. So I'm back in the water. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
I miss swimming. Yeah. One of my favorite things about Herzo was the pool by the office, where I like swimming outdoors versus like in a enclosed pool. But I used to love, they had both. We had the indoor pool and we had the outdoor pool. But in the summer, the outdoor pool, it's like, I love swimming and like seeing your shadow on the bottom. Like that's, I don't know. The sun rising and swimming it's nice. I miss that.
That pool in Herzo with the indoor outdoor was, it's one of those things like, I was just actually talking to my partner about this a while ago, talking about like when you're in situations and you don't really appreciate the situations that you're in until you're out of it, and you go, oh man, that pool in Herzo was, that was such a cool pool, or or how clean that town was, or how like fun that place was. I think you forget about those things. And I was saying to her, it's like, because we're thinking about moving and we're looking for places. And she said, what are our requirements? And I said, it's got to be near a pool. It's got to be near a train station to get into London. And she's like, this pool thing. But anyways, we were talking about pools, and I was like, yeah, the pool in Herzo was, Yeah, it was definitely the one. It was really, really nice there.
The
Missed that
hardest
place a little
part
bit.
was that you only had like an hour with your token if you went to the indoor pool. So like you
Yeah.
wanted to get your workout in and then you had to get changed. And I wish they had like some of the gyms here have like those fans you can stand in, like out of the shower so you dry off faster. And then but it was so hard to like get out of the pool, shower, dry off enough to put your clothes on so that they looked normal and then get out. Like there were so many days where it's like, it's been 30 seconds, let me out, please.
The funny thing about the tokens that kills me is like, again, me as a person, like the obvious. I just remember going into the place with a bag, one of those Ziploc bags filled with change.
Yeah.
And like putting it in the thing, like it was a Euro 20 or something like that, and just put it in the thing, and then doing that for 6 months. The same guy working behind the counter, like almost every day, and then finally the guy coming around and going, you can buy a card and you don't have to do the change every time. And I was like, oh, dude,
yeah,
why didn't you tell me that 6 months ago? And so you watch me every day stand here with my coins going 10, 20,
That's
30,
so
40.
German.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very, very German. Many stories about that town.
Think about how entertained he was by you for all those weeks.
Oh, loved it. Absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. And, there's me with like all my old former U.S. national team jerseys and stuff like that on. So he's going American. Yeah, we're going to have some fun with this for a little while.
Yep.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there's like kids running by with their cards and you're like,
exactly. How's he getting in? What's going on there? Yeah, it was a good time.
So you made your transition from, professional Ironman, long distance triathlete. And then one day you were interviewing me at Puma. So how did you make that jump from athlete to creating products for athletes?
Yeah. So I moved to Austin after I left. Well, I moved to Orlando, Florida first, after I graduated from university to go work for Walt Disney.
Very cool.
Which is anybody who knows me knows that I have a huge obsession with Mickey Mouse. I've had it in my entire life, actually. It goes back to my childhood, but and in school I always wanted to work for Disney. In middle school and high school, if anybody asked me what I wanted to do, it was go work for Disney. And at a younger age, it was to go be an illustrator or work in the Imaginarium or something like that, but better in life. So when 1 year after I finished swimming, university, I had a summer, and I went and worked for Walt Disney in the college program, which is an amazing program. I've got a nephew, and I keep pressuring him to like sign up for it. I'm like, bro, it's such a cool thing. It is, you live on Disney property. It's college kids from all over the world. You take courses, you work in different places, from a learning experience and just from a fun aspect. It's just a brilliant thing. But anyways, I did that for a summer. And then when I was there, I met a couple of people who worked in like the marketing departments and different things like that, and said, when I graduate, I'm coming back. And they were like, you come back, we'll sort you out with the gig, come back, no problem. So I moved to Disney, to Orlando for a year, working in the Disney timeshare condominium business, which was a whole nother story I could tell for hours about. Lots of stories there. And then still trying to do some cycling stuff, still trying to do some triathlon, cycling, running, swimming stuff. And then didn't really work out with Disney because I couldn't really find like my thing at Disney. So I moved back to Texas. And when I moved back to Texas, I moved to Austin because at the time, and still to this day, Austin was a mecca for running and for cycling and swimming and triathletes and things like that. So I moved to Austin. And when I got to Austin, I went back to school to get my master's in exercise physiology, and was going to school, was training pretty much full time, was still trying to make the professional gig work, and to be honest, dead dead honest with you, it wasn't. I was doing well in races, but not well enough for somebody to sign me on a contract. And went into a running shoe store in Austin, Texas, a place called Runtex. A guy by the name of Paul Carosa, who is still one of my best mates and still my main mentor to this day. Walked into the store and was in there to buy a hydration system because I was going to go do an Ironman. And I was there at the wall trying on different hydration systems and being who I am, laying them down. And, this one weighs this much and that one's this and that one's that and da-da-da-da-da and all the pros and cons.
Totally nerding out about hydration systems.
Totally nerding out, like way too much information. And a woman that was stood beside me asked me, thinking I worked there, said, which is the best hydration system? And I went full nerd on her, went in. I was like, well, if you're going to run this much, da-da-da-da-da. And the sales associate stood there, a guy who worked there stood there and was listening to him. At the end of it, she goes, okay, I'll buy that one. Turned around and walked away. And I picked mine up and was walking to the counter. And the sales guy said, hey, man, are you involved in sports? And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing exercise physiology at UT and I'm trying to be a pro triathlete. And he was like, how are you making money? And I was like, right now, not very well. Not very well at all. And he was like, we need somebody here. I'll speak to the owner. I think you'd be great. I really like, I'm sure he'll really like you. He probably can get a job here. Come back a couple days later, walked in, met Paul and his wife, Sheila. I didn't even think there was an interview. I think it was more like, hey, mate, chat with us for a little bit. Let's talk about what you do and who you are, yada, yada, yada. And then a week later, I was working the sales floor and they were, at the time they were kind of a smallish operation, but, in the next 2 to 3 years, they were one of the premier running shoe stores in the country. And then all the shoe companies used to come visit them because Paul, the owner, is this, I don't even know how to describe him. He's amazing with feet and shoes. He's an incredible coach. He's still coaching kids to this day. And all the shoe companies would come in and they would sit with Paul and they would talk to them about things. And Paul and I became close friends and he'd just invite me in to different things. And I'd sit down with them and meet all the different people and, guys we worked with at Puma I knew, and people I worked with later on at Adidas I met, and people I worked with at Nike later on I met. And yeah, I just started doing that. And then Paul got the Runner's World Shoe Review. So he started doing, all the shoe companies were sending the shoes to him, and he started doing all the shoe reviews for them. And I started helping him out with that. And then we started traveling to Boston Marathon, New York Marathon, Honolulu Marathon. And then when you do that, all the shoe companies are, they're being nice to you because they think you're going to give them a good review and stuff like that. And I was in a bar in New York City when Nike used to sponsor the New York City Marathon. And some of the big guys at Nike were there, and some of their athletes were there. I think it was the night after the marathon, when everybody was having a good time. And one of the top guys at Nike in the running division turned to me and said, hey, what are you going to do once this triathlon thing ends? And I went, shit, I have no idea. I have zero idea, man.
So does that mean that you worked with Tom Archie?
I worked with Tom Archie, and I worked with Tim Slingsby, and I worked with Kirk Richardson and Fritz Taylor, and
because Tom was my last boss at DC, and now
oh really?
We're buddies. When I go to Portland, we always grab a coffee or a lunch or something.
But didn't he go to Saucony for a little while or something like that?
Yeah, after he was at Quicksilver World Board Riders, he went over there. Yeah. He's a fascinating guy with tons of stories too.
Yeah, I mean, all those guys from the East Coast, because that whole, I think what people don't realize about the shoe industry is, yes, a lot of it's in Portland now, but for a long, long time, Boston, there was a Nike factory in Boston, and Reebok was there, and Saucony was there, and Spot Built was I mean,
Yeah.
there were so many, New Balance, everybody was there. So all those kind of East Coast guys like Archie and guy's name, all those dudes that were up there, they kind of like built the industry. Like they were there, and then Nike and Adi did their thing in Portland. But that was so all those guys like.
And the only reason
Strasser,
Adi went to Portland was because of Nike.
Yeah. But all those guys there, like, I mean, if you've ever read everybody's onto the book Shoe Dog, and I keep telling them, it's a good book, but if you want to read the real book, read Swoosh. It's impossible to find. But that book talks about how, like, Strasser and Phil Knight and Hollister and all those guys, like, how they built those businesses across the board. And it tells, like, the real poop about the industry from like that book is amazing. And I keep telling all my shoe friends guys who are trying to get into it, I'm like, read this book, because that was East Coast. Those guys started all. But yeah, like all I like
Sneaker Wars too.
Yeah, Sneaker Wars is an amazing one as well. Yeah, but Swoosh is the one, if you could find it. It's really hard to find because I don't think they print it anymore, because I think there was a bit of a legal thing about it.
Might have been too honest.
Yeah. I think I think it's a tough one to find, but it's an amazing book. But yeah. So I was doing that, and then one of the guys at Nike said, what about coming and working for us? And it wasn't like, come work for us. It was like, hey, we, if something comes up, we'll put your name forward for it and whatever. And I did the Nike interview thing, which is, to this day, probably one of the craziest interview processes. Like you had a phone interview, and then I flew to Portland, and I had a round of like interviews with a couple of different people in the department, flew home. Then they flew me back again, and I had to give a presentation. And then I came back again, and I had to give a presentation on something that I made. I mean, it was mad.
That's how my Puma one was.
Yeah, back in the day, like I keep hearing about these guys getting these jobs, and I'm like, not sounding like the old man that talks about, walking 2 miles uphill in the snow. But back in the day, those interviews were a bitch, man. Like they really grilled you. Yeah. Like you had to present, and you had to do multiple presentations. You had to do like 5 of them in a day. You had to present to one guy, and then the next guy, and then the next guy. They weren't easy, man.
They were hard on you. And I remember, so the presentation I did for Puma was for like what I would do with the kids department. And I remember Adrian being like, that's cute. Great presentation. I'm not sure if you'll achieve any of that here, but we'd love to have you. And so I made it my mission to check off as much as possible in that presentation just to prove him wrong.
Come on, K-Duff. The Carrot Duffy kids presentations will go down in history as some of the greatest presentations of all time. I remember prior to you getting there, when the kids presentation came up, I don't remember, I'm not going to slate anybody, but before you got there, when the kids presentation came up, none of us were like, yeah, whatever. Kids presentation, let's hit the pub. It's over.
That's what everybody said, even the sales reps.
when you got there and you started giving presentation, it was like, dude, what time's it? Shit, kids presentation's on. We got to go make the kids presentation, because there's going to be some Cinderella story, or there's going to be some other story or something like that. Those presentations were...
Well, I had a lot of pressure because Thomas Yosnick was doing some really hilarious presentations. They're like, so everyone told me they had to be funny. I'm like, I am the least funny person I have ever met. What are you talking about? So it was so stressful to have to build a presentation that wasn't my style at first, but then it kind of like slowly got built in, because I didn't know the inside jokes or things to include at first. So I'm like literally making it with other people, like, all right, I'll present. And to go from presenting to like a table of people to suddenly there's like, I don't know, 500 people in a room looking at you, but not looking at you because they're on their phones, because English is their second language and they don't care. Yeah. It was a crazy experience, but
in that what warehouse / showroom / auditorium you used to present in.
Yeah.
In the middle of nowhere in Herzogenaurach.
Middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
The first time I ever went on stage, Tammy had just presented something, probably the marketing for kids. and we had done a shot in the back of like tequila, just coming off. I was nervous. She said something where I laughed so hard walking upstairs to go onto the stage that I was like, I'll be fine. Like she saved that presentation for me because I just relaxed in a second.
T-Rock, the good old Tammy.
Right?
Yeah, those were the days, man. Yeah, those were the days.
So to summarize for people, you were at Nike, then you're at Puma, then you were at Puma Boston, where we started working together, and then you moved to Germany, where I was at the time, but to work for Adi. And then from Adi, you went on to work, you moved to London, and you've been in London ever since.
Yeah, so I went from Nike, worked for those guys for a while. Then I left Nike and I went to go work for Cliff Bar. And when Cliff Bar was starting off their Luna bar stuff, which is our women's specific bar, and started helping them do like the Luna Chick teams and stuff like that in the South. And then did that for a bit. And I started my own company doing kind of marketing and sales for a lot of brands like Dolphin Swim and Kestrel Bikes and all these different kind of like sportswear brands. And I picked up Pearl Izumi. And then I built this business and then I killed the business where I built the business selling to accounts in Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. And then, some of the companies would be like, hey, you got Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. Can you pick up New Mexico? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll take New Mexico. And then they go, can you pick up Colorado? Can you pick up Utah? Can you pick up Wyoming? And so I was doing all this area and more accounts, but the business wasn't growing exponentially in relation to the geographics and the costs. And so I kept taking things on and finally woke up one day and went, wow, I'm really upside down in this thing. And then one of my brands was Pearl Izumi, and Pearl Izumi, Tom Adams was an old Nike guy, and he was working at Pearl Izumi and basically said, hey, we're looking for somebody who has a sports background, somebody who has some design background, because I did, and then somebody who has a little bit of biomechanics because of what I did at UT, to come in and start our footwear division because we want to start doing cycling shoes and running shoes and stuff like that. And they'd already started doing cycling shoes with some really cool people that I'm still friends with today. They said, can you come in and do the running stuff for us? And so I started doing the running stuff and went from no shoes to actually making shoes to working designs to actually producing them to actually selling them in. So it wasn't just like product line management. It was like actually going to the accounts and sitting across from, the head of Foot Locker and going, please buy these shoes, trying to get orders done. So I did that. And then I took a couple of years off and drove across the US for a little while. And then, and then Puma, started off in Boston, in the running division with some of our old mates. Did that for a few years and then left to go work for Adidas and moved to Germany in our old home of Herzogenaurach. You got there before me. Worked for those guys for 3 years, probably some of the best years ever. Just amazing place and great brand and stuff like that. Then I moved to London 12 years ago. At first, I started off working for Wolverine, which is Saucony, Ked, Sperry. My old life of Stride Right and Stride Right, yeah. Started off with them doing Hush Puppies. Was brought in with the notion of bringing Hush Puppies back to life. An old classic American comfort brand, and did that with them, and then took on Keds and took on Sperry and took on Pro Keds for those guys, and then did that for a few years, and then I got met a guy from Samsung at a thing, again serendipitous, and just kind of having chats with somebody, and struck up a conversation with him, chatting with him about some stuff, and he was like, you ever thought of getting into tech, and I was like, oh, bro, like I seriously, like I barely know how to turn on the TV. Like, I'm not your guy for that. Like, this would not be me. And he was like, no, we need somebody who doesn't have that background. We need somebody who is completely, that will look at it from
a real customer,
a different perspective, from a customer's perspective, and will look at it a completely different way and, think about it. And it was like a long kind of back and forth where it would be like, yeah, maybe. And then I go, nah, like I'm a sports guy. I'm a sneaker guy. Like, and then finally I met the guy who was their CMO, who was just a brilliant man, just an awesome, awesome guy. And then I met the CMO woman in Samsung Korea, met both of them, and we're like, okay, like these people are legit. These people are for real. And moved over to them and worked for them for 3 years. And yeah, learned an enormous amount. And we used to think that our lives were fast paced in sports and shoes. Like, it's nothing like technology. It's next level, man. It's absolutely next level.
Yeah, we were already getting bored with our own products when they'd come to market because we were already on to the next thing. And I think about how fast technology is going. Like, what do you have? Like 2 weeks from when the idea comes out to when you want to sell it before you're over it and the customer's over it. Like, it gives me anxiety to think about that speed.
But you're even in our world, shoes and stuff like that. Like, you're pitching a collection for 12 months, 16 months in advance, and you don't see it come out, but you're still pitching that because there's the sell-in and there's the this and there's the that and the this and that. Where in technology, like a month before the phone's supposed to be, a guy's supposed to stand on stage in, the Brooklyn Nets arena to talk about the phone, they're still deciding whether or not it's going to have an AMOLED screen or how big it's going to be or what the processor is going to be. Like, they're still figuring that kind of stuff out. And from a marketer or from a creative perspective, you're at the ready going, okay, it could be this big or it could be that big, or it could, the colors could be these colors or it could be those colors, or it could be, this much processor or that much processor. And they're just moving at such a pace. And it's quite, it's really cool, but it's massively stressful for a lot of different people because everyone just kind of like, you're making multi-million-dollar decisions based on what you think it's going to be, and then it might be something different. And then there's the other thing, which was kind of similar to what we did before, but I think quite different, is just the secrecy factor. Like, if a phone gets leaked before it gets launched, like, it's a major issue because all the Chinese competitors can knock it off in a month or a week or 2 weeks. So you can't say anything. You can't talk about anything until that moment. So it's all, cloak and dagger until the weeks before the whole thing happens, and then you've got to launch it. So it was quite a learning curve. I mean, it was fun and it was mad, but it was definitely very different from where I was before, where we've been before, actually. Very different. But yeah, that's me. That's where I've been. That's what I've been doing, man.
So, you've been in London for 12 years now, which is, I've been in California for 11 now. How has it been being in London during a pandemic when London is not where you're from?
I think the thing about this whole pandemic thing for me is, it's really interesting because I have friends that are, in the entertainment industry or own restaurants or things like that, where you see the actual impact that the lockdown has had. Like, face to face, you see like how devastating that is for their financial livelihood, but also just their well-being and, the interactions that they have with people. For me, because I'm used to kind of doing work on my own, or because I've, either, worked in in kind of autonomous ways, kind of
Right.
entrepreneurial ways.
Or on an
Before
airplane and a hotel room and
yeah,
backstage.
or the freedoms of our kind of our lives and the industries that we've worked with. We've never been kind of punch a clock at 8 a.m. and leave at 6 o'clock. We're traditionally always on. We're working all the time. Even in the shoe industry, you're walking down the street, and you're checking people's sneakers out. Like you can't not look at people's sneakers. Or in the phone industry, I go into a pub and I look at how many people are pulling out iPhones versus Samsungs versus Huawei. You're always on that. And I think, so for me in that instance, it hasn't been that different for me because I'm used to working in that way and used to working with people living in Herzog and working with people in Portland or working with people. So this whole kind of Zoom thing is not that different for me as well.
Yeah, same.
So it hasn't really, from a working perspective, I don't think it's really impacted me that much. Now, from a personal perspective, not being able to get home has been devastating. Like, my family's still in Texas, and I haven't seen them coming up almost a year and a half now. That part of it has been really, really challenging. And also kind of the different perspectives on, the perception of a lockdown in London versus the perception of a lockdown in, let's say, Spring, Texas. Very different. So that's been a bit of a challenge, but I think the main thing about it is I think it's kind of what I see. A lot of what's happening in London is I think it's forcing London to slow down a bit, which some people think is a bad thing, but I actually think it might wind up being a bit of a good thing for the world. But it hasn't been that. I'm remiss in saying that it hasn't been that bad for me because I know it's devastated many people's lives. But for me personally, I can't say that it's been a horrible experience for me.
Yeah. No, same. I mean, the biggest thing I realized is how antisocial I had been and didn't realize it because like lockdown happened. And I was like, whatever, my day, I work from home. I live at home, like just keep going. So I have it's being like a 50-50 introvert extrovert. It took me a long time before I was like, okay, I'm done. Like, get me out of here. Plus, I'm on Zoom calls all the time. Like, I still had interaction. But
I think that's an interesting thing because I think that's where I've seen it with the different types of friends that I have. So having friends that are in entertainment, dancers, actors, people like that. Having the personal interaction taken away from them has been devastating for these guys. It's not just the career that's been impacting, but that kind of like feedback that they traditionally get between audience member and performer or this and that. Like I've seen that quite very much in my face a lot because of the friends that I have. Then there's the kind of the engineers and the scientist guys that I know that are just like, what, life's changed? Like this is, like what do you mean? Nothing's like this is, I put my head down, I do this, I do that, I do this, and that's my thing. And then there's kind of like what you're saying, the people in the middle that like, I get up some days and I kind of go, okay, this is what we're doing. I'm fine with it, head down. And then you raise your head up and you go, oh, wait, I kind of want to go do some of these things, these human interaction things, and they're just not there.
Yeah. The hardest thing for me has been that my dad retired and they were in Louisville, Kentucky for a couple of years for his last job. They sold their house. They're at the time just moved in with my brother and sister who happen to be in Burbank. And so they're an hour away from me. We haven't lived in the same state or the same country for like over, oh my gosh, like so many years now. And it must be 20. I keep saying 10, but I think it's actually 20 because I have to remember to add on Germany stuff. But I was so excited to like think that they'd be out here. We can like go for lunch or go on a hike together or just do things. And I can't see them. So it's like, it's almost no different if how you are with your family, where it's like, mine are down the street and I can't see them. They have some, underlying conditions, so it's risky. And then for Christmas Eve, Jesse and I got COVID, which was awesome. So like we're just kind of coming out of that now, but it's like I agree with you in that I'm excited about how this experience has caused us to relook at everything and really decide what we need or don't need to function as businesses and companies and ourselves. And like having it just like chill out a little bit. Like I think about all the people who commute in LA and London, like to be on the train for 2 hours a day each way. Think about how those lives have changed because they didn't have to do that.
But I've been doing some work with some different companies, some big corporations and some small stuff. And the bigger corporations are the ones that are the most like, oh, wait a second. You mean we can work this way? And,
Yeah.
the smaller places I've worked with are, they're kind of like going, yeah, of course you can work this way because that's, that's, they almost have to work that way because of, investment and capital and stuff like that, where these big corporations haven't been forced to think about that. And I think to me, that's been really interesting is listening to some of these corporations, people being quite shocked at the fact that, that they can work in this manner and that the wheels of commerce haven't slowed down for them. Now, for the smaller people and, the restaurants, I understand it's really impacted them, but these bigger corporations realizing that, this mythological 40-hour work week hasn't existed for most people for 25, 30 years. Like it hasn't existed. It's ridiculous. And, you've got companies like Patagonia and Cliff Bar and stuff like that have kind of these, kind of open-ended ways of working, get your work done. But if you want to go surf, or you want to go do this, the joy of the employee being greater than kind of this mandated kind of mythological thing, they're realizing this and they're kind of seeing like, okay, this is a possibility. What I'm most curious about is when, hopefully everything starts to mellow out, are these companies going to maintain that mentality or are they going to fall back on, not bad habits, previous habits of, okay,
archaic habits.
You've got to do this, you've got to do that. I work with a couple of young guys on a project right now. And one of the guys the other day was telling me about a contract that he had with one company where if he decided he didn't want to work with it anymore, he just didn't show up. That was it. Like, what? He called in person and say, hey, listen, it's not working for me. I'm out. There wasn't a 2-week notice period or a month notice period. It was just like, I'm stopping working, so you should stop paying me. And the guy that was it. And he was telling me about this, and my old kind of, old man way of thinking thing went, well, that sounds a bit. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, but that kind of makes sense. Like if you're just done, you're done, and I get that there's a gap between people coming in and people coming out, but he was just like, yeah, that's just kind of the way a lot of the contracts I have right now that I'm working on are, it's just 0 hour. That's it. I'm done. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And then in listening to the way these guys are talking about all these different things, I'm just going, I'm hoping that some of this changes are making people think about the way that they approach this and the way that we work and the way that we think that work is or what its value is. Or all these other kinds of things. So, that's been the most, fascinating thing to me or interesting to me about it, as well as social media, because I haven't quite formalized it yet in my head, but we have this kind of like social media thing where we were living apart from each other through social media. And then when we were forced to live apart from each other, we were upset that we now are living apart from each other. Yeah. And I kind of want to go, but there's something about social media in there that's got to work out. Like hopefully it's going to make people want to be face to face more. Yeah. Like some of the guys I work with, one of my biggest frustrations with them is this email thing where like there's 50 emails that comes off of one question. I keep turning to the guys and going, dude, just pick up the phone and call them.
Right. Just call first and then Slack second. Do not write me an email.
And the faces on some of these dudes are like, what do you mean call? I'm like, mate, just call him.
Yeah.
Like, can I WhatsApp him? I'm like, no, because you're gonna, and I'm in the group, and then I'm gonna get 10 messages about, hey, thanks for sending me, hey, thank you, no, thank you, yeah, thank you, no, thank you. Just call and go, hey, thanks, man. We've done this X, Y, and Z.
Right.
But anyways,
I have a whole thing for my own companies, but also within the group coaching I do about how do we just like never use email. And they're like, what? I'm like, I like email takes up time. I have to either delete it or answer it. 90% of my emails I just delete because no one needs an answer. Like I'm over CYA stuff unless it's super critical. But like, no, it's
my favorite one is the thanks email reply. That's what
especially reply done. All. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah. Anyways, it's not like an old man right now. But anyways. Yeah,
no, I had a sign on my last office that said, don't be an asshole. And it was very similar of like, why are you coming to ask me? Because you don't want to go like Google it yourself, or you don't want to go find it in the directory or ask your neighbor. Like, I do not need to answer your question.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm hoping it does something for us. I don't know what it'll do, but I hope it does something.
Well, I think there's we already had the transition, right, of a lot of people going like independent or contractor or freelance kind of happening. So there was already that momentum. But to me, it's like, I don't understand why more conservatives in the US aren't for a public healthcare system, because it actually allows more people to be independent and not do work they don't want to do. Like the biggest reason people are nervous to be an entrepreneur in the US is like, how do I make sure I have health insurance?
But also, how am I going to pay for my student loan?
Yes. And so even just like, at least in California, like I can buy relatively affordable health insurance. It's still more expensive than it probably should be. But it's like, why are we making that why someone stays trapped in a job they don't like? That's not good for anybody.
Yeah, those kind of old traditions are. I mean, I think that speaking to a friend of mine the other day, he's got 2 young girls. She was talking about a few different things that are happening in the world, and I keep saying this. I keep saying to people that have children and people that are of certain ages, I just think those guys are going to save us all, because they're going to bring a different perspective than my generation, our generation has, and they're looking at things, and they're, I think that question of why has been lost for a long time. Like, just, it's not, I'm saying it's good or it's bad. I just want to understand why it's this way. Why? Yes. Just please explain to me the why. And if we can uncork the why, and the why becomes a reason to believe, then let's go that pathway. But if we don't ask the why first, and I think there's, people call them a snowflake or call them whatever you want to call them, but these guys that are asking the question of why are the ones that are really kind of pushing the boundaries, and hopefully are going to be the ones that kind of, again, I think save us on multiple levels, environmentally, politically, socially, all these other kinds of things, to continue to ask that question why. And a lot of those, a lot of those questions are stemming from, I think, what is hopefully coming out of this fourth turning that we're in right now, where people are, things are degrading so poorly that the spring must follow somehow, and the way the spring follows is people kind of asking that question of why, quite consistently.
I agree. It's also why I'm pro like skipping. I don't care if 18-year-olds vote, but I think we should just probably let only people between ages 5 and 8 vote, because they probably would do a better job at choosing for all of us. Right? They're going to ask why, and then they're going to be like, I don't know, is this fun? Is this good for people?
Is this fun? This isn't fun would probably be a lot of what people are saying.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, so I'm a big believer in asking why a lot. Like the clarity workshop I do is asking people why about everything. Like, why do you live in that apartment? Why do you have these things? Like almost having an existential why to kind of break through some things. How much do you ask yourself why in your life, and how has it kind of led to the different journeys that you've had so far?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm a bit reminiscent about why, because I think I especially right now, I wish I would have asked why a lot more,
Mm-hmm.
more often, not of others so much, but of myself.
Yep.
Probably, 15, 20, 30 years ago, I wish I would have made that question come to life a lot more than it has. And I think I don't know, I don't know why, but I think over the past like 5 or 6 years, that question of why has become, super, super important to me. I don't know if there's a book called The 100-Year Life. I don't know if you've read it yet, but
No,
if
it
you
sounds
haven't,
awesome.
it's an incredible book. But I mean, for anyone listening and for you, I won't ruin it. But essentially, the the premise is we're getting older. Our
Mm-hmm.
life expectancy is growing and growing and growing. And when our life expectancy was something in the 50-year to 60-year range, things were quite linear. You went
Mm-hmm.
from manager to this, to that, to this, to that. You got this car, then you got the bigger car, and da 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 da. As our life expectancy grows, things have less of an opportunity to be linear.
Mm-hmm.
And the question of why would I have to go from being a marketing director
Yep.
at X company to being a VP to being a CMO? Why can't I be a marketing director at X company and then find my passion in, I don't know, sustainability
Mm-hmm.
and go become a potentially a lower level than I was before and find that and build that. And then I become more multiplicitous. I become more
Mm-hmm.
intelligent. I become a more rounded person.
Bigger
I can interact
contributor.
better, bigger
Mm-hmm.
contributor, all these different kinds of things. And my old CMO at Samsung, before he left, he gave a few of us that book
Mm-hmm.
as a recommendation because he was the CMO of Samsung and didn't tell us he told us he was leaving, but didn't tell us where he was going. And of course, everybody in the building's going, okay, he's CMO of Samsung. He's going to become CMO of Coca-Cola now, or he's going to become CMO of, what have you. And he became the general manager of a third-tier football club on the
Awesome.
east coast of the UK because it was near his hometown and because he loves football. And and everybody, not everybody, a lot of people were like quite shocked by that. And I was like, fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah,
like,
me too. I'm like, that sounds awesome.
I'm like, that is awesome. And yes, he's probably built up enough of a substantial financial backing to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's other people I know that, are doing the same things. And I think that for me is this question of why, why does the path have to be linear?
Yeah.
And why do things have to be done a certain way? Like, even like I've been ill for a few years now, and meeting some new and different people that think in medicine in a different way, and they're not alternative medicine, they're not holistic medicine, they just have different mindsets. And people like Rich Roll or the McGonagall or any of these different people have kind of these different mindsets of just kind of challenging things of like, why is it that way? And I've really, over the past 5 years, I found myself going deeper into that why. And sometimes I go into the deep why and I come out and I go, okay, that didn't answer the why, so I'm going to keep exploring for a different thing. And then sometimes I come out of the deep why and I go, okay, that's why. And that gives me a new perspective. I may not buy into that new perspective, but I feel like I have a better understanding of something. And I think that's that question of why has become so much greater for me. And I also think, in going back the previous thing, I wish I would have asked myself questions about why things are a certain way, or ultimately why I reacted to things in a certain way, or why I did things in a certain way. Because I think that's where I probably could have had more understanding of decisions made or choices or things like that. And that's become a much bigger component of my thinking recently.
Well, and it's to me that asking why is always allowing us to come back to like what we actually care about, like what matters to us, and how to just live a more intentional and curated life that's for us custom design versus whatever we're supposed to do. Like I talk a lot in the Powerful Ladies group about just because you should, like you could or you should. So are you living a life of shoulds or are you living a life of coulds? Like that guy was like, I could go be a general manager at my hometown for football, which I never thought might have happened. Or everyone's like saying I should go become president somewhere else now because I've been this. Like what sounds more fun and what's exciting versus expected.
And what's also, I think the why question for me, at least, and this is just is also the value systems. Like what are the things that you value the most? And I, again, like thinking retrospectively, like I wish I would have kicked around my values a little bit more when I was in different opportunities or different places. Like I wish I'd have kicked around, like, like this, going back to the start of this, like the swimming thing, like that being in water or doing that, or that, whatever that does for me, I've realized is much more important and impactful than I think I realized. And it's part of my value system. And I wish I would have, thought about that more. Cause I think, our values potentially change throughout life, but there's a few core values that are probably going to stick around for most of it. And not really sitting down with myself and not hiking up to the top of a mountain and spending a month or a year up there thinking about it, but just spending some time thinking about what are those values I think potentially could have shaped decisions and pathways. Not that I've had some bad pathways in my life or career. I'm quite fortunate and even more so lucky than I would say fortunate. Anybody who knows me well knows that. I wish I would spend a little bit more time kicking around those values. And then once you have those kind of values kicked around, then when you start to question the why, it gives you something to go back to on the whys, where maybe for me, I haven't really kind of had the whys and the values
organized and clear.
Organized and clear. And, it's, like leaving Adidas, why did I leave Adidas? It was a brilliant job. It was an incredible place to work. I was surrounded by insane creativity, sport, athletes, Herzo is a thing, but Herzo is a thing, like, what Herzo is, like, you get
it's like the crazy uncle in the corner, Herzo.
Yeah, exactly. So, like question those things, I think would have been, that's been a big thing. And I think this COVID thing has intensified or exacerbated that why questioning for not just for me, but I think for a lot of different people, like specifically here in London, like the amount of people that are getting out of London right now, that are moving out of London, like moving from the city, is pretty spectacular. Like I've got friends that, have lived in London for 18, 20, 25 years that I'm, on calls or on chats with going, yeah, we're actually thinking of moving out of London. And I'm like, wow, like that's insane. Like you work in the theater district. Why would you, the West End is right there for you. And they're like, what is it providing? What's all these kinds of things. So I think it's a big thing that's happening for a lot of people.
Yeah. Like, obviously I think the word pivot was like the word for 2020, but my coaching was like, okay, we're pausing. We have to prioritize, we have to prune, and then we can pivot. And so I think people are being forced into that pause, prioritize, and prune element of looking at life, because when you're stuck in the same four walls for days on end, like you go through that whole phase of like, I hate everything I own. I hate our house. Like you're like, I don't want any of this stuff. Like get rid of it. So just that alone, and those are things. That's not even the bigger picture stuff. But I think it's really interesting. One of the things that I've always really admired about you is that from the outside looking at your path, it seems like you've been really intentional about what you've curated, like who's in your life, what you're working on, what's on your bookshelf. Like I think you're good at making vignettes, right? Of like your life. and making them intentionally. Do you feel like you're curating your path, or is that just a happy accident?
I'm definitely curating my path.
Yeah.
I definitely am. I mean, I think events in my life have been happy accidents. But my dad used to say that, fortune is the perfect intersection of luck and hard work. I've definitely put in a lot of, even in sport and in work, I've put in a lot. I mean, those days at Puma, there's some graft in that place, and those days at Audi, there's some graft. But the reason why you get to graft at Audi and Puma and Nike is because they know you'll graft. That's why you get there. It's not. It's kind of chicken and egg. Who became first? Whatever. And I've been lucky in my career, but I don't think it's been. I've just kind of stumbled into things. It's because I worked really hard for Paul at that running shoe store, and because I worked really hard for him, he allowed for me to go do things with him, which allowed for me to meet a guy at Nike, which allowed for me to. Get that career started at Nike.
And the whole thing starts to open up.
And the whole thing starts to go, and the whole thing starts to move. I think the curation part of it for me has always been, I haven't, as I said, I don't think I've ever sat down and kind of kicked around what my values are until recently. But I know what the things are that push my buttons. I know the things that flip my switch. I know the things that I love. And when I love something, I love it. I mean, simple things. Mickey Mouse. I mean, I love Mickey Mouse. I wanted to work for him, so I went to work for him. When I graduated high school, he mysteriously walked me across the stage. I've got Mickey Mouse tattoos. When I love something,
or stickers.
I'm into it. Yeah, stickers. Yeah, more stickers. Swimming, sport, all those kinds of things. So I've curated those things because those are central to who I am. And then also just, the quest for, my dad was an educator, and so that quest for knowledge has always been part of it. So I've curated that kind of consistent quest for learning things. And even my career, working at Adidas, until recently, my career has always been having a job that got me to go to Vietnam or to Taiwan. They don't sound like sexy, fun places, but the experiences and the
they haven't gone with us. No, that's why.
Yeah. Yes. The experiences. I mean, those were some of the coolest things ever. And my friends that are in entertainment, I talk to them about, you stood on stage. Doing the Spice Girls tour, and there's 50,000 people in front of you, and that experience that you have, and not that it's the same, but for me, some of the experiences where they had were kind of like my Spice Girls, moment, being on stage as the Spice Girls, like doing those kinds of things, standing in front of all those people, giving those presentations for the Olympics, or
being at the
Olympics, or things like that. So
how about being at the Olympics with athletes winning with shit you made?
Hey, I mean, I again, going through some things I'm going through right now. I've been writing down key moments in my life and things that are super pivotal moments. But being in Beijing Stadium in 2008, 6 rows up from the track. On one side, I've got Tommy Smith, 1968, Mexico gold medal winner, famous for the black glove. On the other side, I've got Dick Fosbury, inventor of the Fosbury flop, first man to go over backwards in the high jump. And on the track is Usain Bolt wearing the gold shoe that Dave Dumbrow, Justin Howe, and I worked on for months and months and months. And then having the PR lady on the other side and me calling her on the phone going, I've got Tommy Smith sat beside me. And he won the 100 meters 40 years ago to the day, to the guy that we've got. Get him over here now. Let's get that picture. And I've got that picture on my desk. Those I think there's luck involved in that. There's hard work in that, but you're curating things to get to that point, to kind of drive those moments where it's like
the moments that you were meant to be there for.
Yeah, I'm lucky that I'm enjoying it, but don't get me wrong. I mean, all of us, I can go through people at Nike, Puma, Audi, all those companies. Those people work. They graft. They work their asses off. You don't get those jobs if you're not going to bust your butt.
No.
But I would say curation is definitely a But I think curation is thinking about things. I don't think it's just, I think curation is there is some cerebral process that goes into that to get, to make things that way. I think it's, maybe I'm more obvious with it than others, but I do think it's, it's definitely a part of me, I would say.
Well, and I think it's a little bit of like PLMing your own life. You get put into this track of like, okay, research, what's happening? What's the problem? How do we solve it? What are other people doing? Okay, what could be cool for us to do? How do we do it differently? And then you put together the plan and you execute on it. And then you like keep doing that process over and over again. I taught people how to make a line plan a few months ago. As we did a whole month on product creation stuff, you would have thought I gave people the Bible. Because people who haven't been trained in product creation and are running businesses, like they're like, oh my God, like if I track my margins, I can do this, this, this. And I'm like, yes, how are you not doing this already? And there's so many people who don't have that like PLM built-in system, which I never realized would be so powerful to how I live life. But it really has. Like it sounds so crazy, but it is that process of the discovery and research and implementation and here's the plan. Let's evaluate. Okay, what's next? We did that for 2,000 SKUs 4 times a year forever.
The thing about the PLM thing that I find super interesting, I was chatting with somebody about this a few months ago, was that we were talking about different things that you learn at different stages of your career, or different kind of like what would be the thing that you would take away from, working at Samsung or Puma and stuff like that. And, yes, each of those places, at least for me, has a certain culture about it. So I could talk days about culture and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I was trying to relate it back to the actual position, just similar to what you were just saying. I just did something for another friend of mine, talking to them about this idea of like an archaeological dig. Mm-hmm. And I really think that comes from that kind of that product line management world where you dug. I mean, you really went in, like not just from a business structuring standpoint, but also the types of products that you would go for, what the trends were, or what when we were doing originals, or we were doing shoes at, the archival shoes at Puma, the backstories of why we would do a Clyde, or why we would do a Stan Smith, or and digging into those kind of stories. And ever since, and all the positions I've had since then, people are quite shocked at the fact that I spend so much time doing, quote unquote, what my friend called an archaeological dig, where you're just like going in and you're just dusting for the littlest detail or for that nugget, and you're trying to find it.
That's what matters. That little nugget changes everything.
Yeah. And I think that was quite interesting for me, of like going from that world into other companies or other businesses, or when you talk to them about it, it was like, how did you come to this? And I was like, well, I just, I dug for it. I went for it. I got in and I found this, and this is interesting, and this led me to this, and this led me to this, and now
let me roll out my hunt a killer map I just made for this one product.
If we've got 10 different things to look at, let's pick 2 or 1 or 3, and let's intensify that. And I think that was that kind of like archaeological dig thing. I think for me, when I was doing product line management, was like one of the major things that I pull from. I'm speaking to somebody the other day that was talking about my CV, about this kind of its creative director at Samsung to this, to that, to this, to that, to this, to that. And that's what I was saying is, the funny thing is I've taken, yes, everyone latches on to, oh my God, you worked at Nike, or oh my God, you worked at Puma or Adidas.
Right.
Which is great because they're amazing brands, but it's not so much the brand, it's the things that you learn at those places.
Yes.
That are ridiculous. They're just like, and you bring that you take that to another company and people are like, wow, where did you, I'm like, dude, this is normal over there.
This is a Monday before 9 a.m. What?
Yeah, this is nothing, man.
That's it. That was my biggest, I felt like going up, when I left Puma, I was shocked at how unfunctional and unstructured every other business was. I'm like, okay, they're making hundreds of millions of dollars and they're not doing any of the basics that I wouldn't have been allowed to pitch something for if I didn't have. And so I think that's why I end up getting moved into more and more like product operations stuff, because they're like, oh, you know how to make all this stuff happen, like teach us. And I'd be like, oh, I don't want to teach you. I'd rather just do it. But it's also what opened up like a lot of my consulting work I'm doing now, because so many people who have a business have never had any corporate like experience. They've never had an MBA. They've never done entrepreneurship school, and they've never worked at a place that changes the market and is a true leader or innovator in their space in any capacity. And I think all those brands you mentioned, they're leading not just in the products they're creating, but also in the marketing and the sales approach and the boring stuff behind the scenes, and also how they develop people. So I was shocked that more of the world wasn't operating in those systems when I left.
Yeah. I think it's because there's such a proliferation of companies and brands coming up. Mm-hmm. And the people that are creating those brands have a certain amount of expertise or a certain amount of passion mm-hmm. in that space, that there is, I'm working on a couple of things on my own right now where there's like talking to a guy that working with some stuff on, I was saying to him, the first year and 2 years I'm not worried about. It's mm-hmm. year 3, 4, and 5 that I'm worried about, because getting it going and getting it up and starting to do this and starting to get, that kind of stuff is, we can do that and we can make this happen. It's what do we do once we get it up and how do we sustain it? Because getting it up and getting it going is, there's multiple examples from my previous lives as well of seeing something that goes like this and then goes like that quite quickly. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that the skill set of maintaining those things is what you get from some of those companies that it's how do you your second album is harder than your first album, that to me is the main thing. Like the sophomore album is a bitch, so we got to invest some time in this and figure that thing out, because that's where it's going to take us to the next level.
That's why you really got to know your why. If you don't remember why you're doing it, you are already screwed. Yeah. Well, so as we're wrapping up today, I would love to know, like, when you think about being powerful, what is the word powerful mean to you? Like, how do you see yourself as powerful, and does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think power for me, again, it kind of goes back to this conversation of being empowered by your values. Like, what mm-hmm. are the things that are important to you, that are core to you, and imparting those upon family, friends, the earth, the world, and stuff like that. I think that's where power comes from, and what it means to be powerful is understanding, where your values are, what you want to do, and how you can take those into the world. And listen a lot to my friend Matthew McConaughey about selfless and selfish. Sometimes by being selfish about figuring out what your values are, it allows for you to be selfless. And that really resonates to me. And I think that's quite powerful. And I think, as I said before, I wish I would have spent more time thinking about that a long time ago, because I think I would have, a different set of perspective. And I think that's, to me, is what I think is powerful in my life right now and who I am right now. And hopefully building on that kind of, building on your values and making them stronger and more meaningful. Because I think once you do that, then it allows for me to potentially create that space around me that's better for not just myself, but for my partner and my friends and my family and potentially some stranger I don't know yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of where my mind is on being powerful.
That makes me really excited, because what I hear is it's like not Noah 2.0, it's like Noah squared, because we just get more Noah in more places and more people knowing about you, which I'm like, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think this, Eva, I think, again, kind of going back to this notion of like, how people are taking these moments and these opportunities that are being presented to us. And it's a horrible situation that we're in, don't get me wrong. And I really want it to not be this way. But also, it's an opportunity for us to do something. It's an opportunity for us to look at so many different things that need to be looked at. And it is not just political or financial and all these other kind of things, because I think those are the bigger sense of things. It's more like the individual and the people that are around you. And if everybody were just to take that kind of time to think about this, I think something great can become, this idea of the fourth turning, things changing and coming something new. It feels like it's in front of us and we're all holding on to it. I just hope we don't fucking drop it, like just hold on to it, look at it for a little while, caress a little bit, smell it, taste it, spend some time with it, and then do something with it. And I just don't want people just to try and move on too quickly, because something's telling us to pause. Something's telling us to slow down. I believe it's Mother Nature, because you can't beat that woman. She's amazing.
Nope.
So just pause and slow down and do something with it. And I think that this kind of evolution, moving forward, whatever you want to call it, is where we are all right now, not just in work, but in life and in love and in everything else. So yeah, I'm hoping it works. I'm hoping we do something with it.
Well, when you're in doubt, just give me a call, because I'm on that team with you.
As always. You've always been on that team, man.
I know. I love the fact that I can't even think about you and not think of being in downtown or being in the karaoke bar or doing something ridiculous on a trip in Asia. I really don't know why.
Downtown, man. Whoa. Is that place still open?
I think so. It was last time I was in Nuremberg. I'm not sure if it's the hip spot that we made it when we were all there.
Man, that place was a joint. I'm telling you. The velvet, was it carpeted walls? And
cheetah print velvet walls.
Print.
When I think about the type of bar that I would want at my house, it's kind of that bar.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. If I was going to make some kind of silly shed bar or basement bar or something like that, it would be that. I mean, it would be carpeted walls. It would be lots of funky mirrors, or that bar that had the funky mirror bar. I mean, it was
the little baby stage, the poles. Yeah.
Yeah. I probably changed the bathroom, but other than that, I'd go with the that look and feel. Definitely would be my home bar if I made one, if I had that kind of money and that kind of space.
I would probably also have it be a little less humid. It was always really humid in there. I'll never understand why.
until it was -5 outside and somebody would open that door and it would just freeze everybody out because you'd be sweating so much and you'd be like, okay, somebody's opened the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some, that's a crazy place, man. It's definitely a crazy place.
It was a huge part of my adventure. And I'm just excited that there's so many people from that time that are still on the team. Still, we're not getting to as many adventures together, but I do feel like we're in this like parallel corkscrews of like what's happening next. So for everyone who now loves you as much as I do, how can they follow you, support you? Where can they go to be on Team Noah?
I'm LinkedIn is, Noah Bernard on LinkedIn is an easy one. My Instagram is Noah_versus_no. Noah versus no is kind of a good indication of me trying to figure out how I push myself to question things and things like that. Those are probably the two best places to find me. I'm on Instagram a lot. And then if you follow me on Instagram, it'll lead you to some other things I'm doing. I've got a running team thing that I'm working on and a few other things that we'll get to see the next few months.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest to coming on the podcast. The one thing I have to ask you, we ask everyone, is where you put yourself on the Powerful Lady scale. 0 being average, everyday human, and 10 being the most powerful lady or gentleman possible. So where would you score yourself today, and where do you think you would score yourself on average?
On average, I'm going to say I'm about a 7. Today, I'm probably about a 6 because I haven't gotten to swim in yet, or I haven't get to swim in today because the pools are closed. But give me about 3 or 4 months, and I'll definitely be 9 or 10.
I like it.
Definitely 9 or 10. Yeah, I'm going for 10. I'm always aiming for 10.
Well, Noah, thank you so much. This means the world to me, and I can't wait to see you in real life sometime soon.
Thanks, Kara. I appreciate you having me on. This has been it's been a joy, to be honest. I'm really, really love this. It's been awesome.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. All the links to connect with Noah are in our show notes at thepowerfulladies.com/podcast. There, you can also leave comments and ask questions about this episode. Want more Powerful Ladies? Come join us on Instagram at Powerful Ladies, where you can also find some free downloads to start being powerful today. Subscribe to this podcast and help us connect with more listeners by leaving us a 5-star rating and a review. If you're looking to connect directly with me, visit karaduffy.com. I'd like to thank our producer, composer, and audio engineer, Jordan Duffy. Without her, this wouldn't be possible. You can follow her on Instagram at Jordan K. Duffy. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Until then, I hope you're taking on being powerful in your life. Go be awesome and up to something you love.